Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome back to our St. Petersburg Science Festival Virtual School Day. We are so incredibly happy you are here joining us today. And we have a great speaker here from Duke Energy, Derek Farfan, and he's going to talk about Energy 101. So take it away.
Thank you, David. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you guys today. As David mentioned, my name is Derek Farfan. I'm an engineer with Duke Energy, and I'm so excited to do the St. Pete Festival at home. So let me go ahead and start sharing with you a bit of our slides. What we're going to talk about today is Energy 101. We're going to go through what it means to generate power, transmit power, and distribute power. So we're going to talk about the process there, and we're going to kind of wrap it up in how do you charge up a cell phone. So we're going to talk about that a little bit and have a little bit of fun. All right. So let's go ahead and show my presentation here. 1 second. Share my screen. All right. All right. Once again, my name is Derek Farfan. This is Duke Energy at home. All right. So we're going to talk about Energy 101 and how power is generated. A little bit about who I am. I'm an electrical engineer. Got my degree from USF, Go Bulls. So my role today, I'm fairly new in this role now. I'm now the new Clean Energy Program Manager for a program we're working on to see if we can come online. But it's going to be the Clean Energy Connection Program for the state of Florida, which is shared solar, a lot of solar farms, a lot of things happening. So as Duke Energy, we're working on all these different initiatives to bring these different markets, these different technologies to bear to help reduce our carbon footprint for the future. So that's what I do. But let's quickly talk about energy and how we generate it and transmit it. All right, first, this is my son. This is a little while ago. He's a bit older now, but his name is Matthias. So we're going to talk about how do you charge a phone. Have you ever thought about what it takes to charge up a phone? Like, we've all been there. You have your phone, you're playing Fortnite, you're doing your thing, and the power goes dead, or you get that warning, and you're like, oh man, I can't complete this mission, I can't complete this level. And we've all been there. So you see your phone, you're upset about how it's out of power, and we're going to talk about what it takes to get your device, your iPad, your phone, your computer, go from a world of having no charge to being charged up. And my son's happy here because he has some power on his phone. All right, so we're going to talk about generation first. So where does the energy come from to generate power? Well, it comes from a few sources. You have coal as one source. You have natural gas as another. You have wind as a source. You have solar as a source. You have nuclear reaction or fission as a source. And there's other sources as well, biomass, things of that nature. But these are all the sources that we use to do the same thing, to generate electricity, to make electrons flow. Keep going. So these are harnessed from the earth in most of these forms. Some of them are finite, such as natural gas or coal. So I'm sure your science teachers have talked to you about that. What does finite mean? Finite means that when that source is complete, it is complete. There's no regeneration of that in our lifetimes. So those sources are finite, such as coal, natural gas, oil, anything that are what we call fossil fuels. Basically, fossilized, dinosaurs' bones have to be in the earth for huge periods of time. And again, if anything were in the earth now, we would never see that become a huge source in our lifetime. So that's why we call it finite sources of energy. And there are things that are relatively or infinite, right? So solar, wind, solar comes from the sun, obviously. Wind comes from, winds flowing throughout the planet. And those are relatively infinite. So those are the kind of two categories we put energy in: finite and infinite or renewable. Next, we're going to talk about where it comes from. So this is a pie graph of the 2019. So this is for the whole United States, not just Florida, of where we get our sources of fuel from to generate electricity. So we see natural gas right now is about 38%, followed by coal at 23%, then nuclear at 20%, wind, hydroelectric at 7%, solar, other, biomass 2, 2, and 1. So the funny thing though is that these numbers have changed since I started doing this presentation, which is about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I remember at one point coal was the highest, and coal has been continually coming down further and further down. Natural gas has kind of come up, but what's happening now is we're working on trying to get other sources into the mix. So as I mentioned before, we're working on different technologies such as solar and wind throughout the country, and all utilities are kind of working on these kinds of technologies to kind of increase the renewable portfolio that we have, so we can have less greenhouse gases and make the future for you guys much more clean and much more robust for you guys. And that's what we're working on every day. We're working on those kinds of things. All right, so let me go back to that graph quickly. So you see, let me go for 1 second. You see nuclear, natural gas, and coal, orange, blue, and gray. We call those thermal sources. So what those sources do, they create heat, and they basically boil water, and that water turns into steam. That steam turns into pressure. That pressure can turn things like blades and like on an airplane, right? An airplane motor, a turbine, and that generates electricity. So those are called thermal sources of energy. Then you have others like solar and wind, right? Solar, just electrons from the sun or photons from the sun are hitting a panel, exciting electrons and causing the movement. Wind, you have wind going across the blade and causing the blade to turn. It's not a thermal source. The wind is just hitting the blades and then causing it to turn. So those are the others in that 19% category. The main of thermal are natural gas, things that you burn to create energy. And we're going to see that in a second here. So let's go to this quick little handy dandy video. So what you're going to see here is these different sources: coal, natural gas, ethanol, nuclear. They all create some kind of heat, right? And it boils water. That water turns into steam. As that steam gets into a pressure, it causes the blades to spin, and they connect it to a shaft and an electric motor. It starts to spin the stator, and it causes the electrons to flow in a circuit. And now we've created electricity. So we've taken that mechanical energy of the motor spinning, and we've turned it into electrons or electricity. And this process happens over and over and over again. That water comes back down, it gets superheated again, and it creates steam, turns into mechanical into electrical, over and over and over again. So that is the thermal process of creating electricity. And that's kind of how it works in a nutshell. All right, next, a little about solar. So it's kind of just the beginning. We're getting more and more into solar. I'm sure as you go through your communities, you might see solar in your communities. As a utility, we're working on utility scale, large areas of solar. This top graphic here is kind of how it works. So you have these photons coming in from the sun, the solar radiation, hitting these panels, causing electrons to flow, and that causes electricity to happen. What you're seeing on the bottom left here is one of the new technologies we're working on. So this is a floating solar farm, right? So we're working on some different areas, right? So you have this body of water, and you can have solar panels on top of the water to use the land that's already there. It also helps reduce the heat into the water as well. Again, these are just different technologies, different ways we're working as utility to get to a place where we can kind of be net zero. And the goal there is 2050. So we're working, all these things are working towards that timeline of getting to a place where our generation is net zero in terms of emissions. Also, you're seeing here is kind of where we began. So you're starting to see some of the plants that we have stood up in the state in Florida. These are relatively small as compared to what we have coming online, or what we plan and hope to have come online in the near future. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of solar. All right, I'm going to show you something cool. So I built this with my son. He's now in 5th grade. So we worked on a power plant model. So normally when I'm in person, I've done the St. Pete Festival before, and I loved it when I was in person, but we can't do that now, and that's okay. So we created a video to kind of show you the model of how we generate power. So bear with me, I'm going to kind of narrate through it with you. I might pause in a few spots. All right, so this is called the power plant model, okay? So this is my son, Matthias. He's the employee, one of the employees. That's my daughter, Isabella. She's an employee as well. I'm going to pause there to show her face. Good. Thumbs up. All right, so we look at the power plant. So here you're seeing a solar panel, right? And that's how it looks in reality. And this is our model. And you're seeing the power plant. And there's things there that, let me pause for a sec. So you see these different sources: natural gas, coal, things of that nature. They all are into a generator. And you're going to see a can crank generator is going to replicate that. But they all generate electricity. Remember, we talked about creating pressure and causing a turbine to spin and cause electrons to flow. That's what you're seeing here. Let me keep going. All right, we're going to go into the community. So what we call in the utility sector, we call this load. So this is the load. We generate our power, and where you live, you have businesses, your house, the community, we call that load. So we generate power to meet that load. If you guys turn on lights, if you guys charge up electric cars, if you turn on your PS5, once you get it, if you get it, you're gonna cause increased load in our system. So we have to have generation to match that load. So let me continue on. All right, so I'm gonna show you a house here. We have a house there. We call, again, residential load. We call that residential. That's your house. And then we have substations. So all that power comes into these areas you see in your community. Let me pause again for a second. Oops, I went backwards too far. Let me pause there. So here's a substation. So I'm sure you've seen this in your neighborhoods. So it's usually an area that's fenced off. You have all these power lines coming into these areas, and we call it a substation. When we transmit power, we transmit at really high voltages, so there's less losses over long distances from our power plants. When it gets to your neighborhood, it has to go to a substation to be stepped down to a lower voltage. You wouldn't want those high voltages coming into your house. You would not want that. So what those substations do is they work on transforming the voltage. They don't generate power. They're not a power plant. They only transform power. And we'll talk about that in a second. But that's what this is, a substation. So all that power comes from the transmission lines to a substation where it gets stepped down to a lower voltage. Then it gets distributed to the network, to the neighborhood. Let's keep going. All right. All right, so this is where it comes in, the phase A and ground. They have your distribution power lines. Usually have street lights on top of them. And that's a pole mounted transformer. Oh, Derek, come on. I mean, go backwards. I'm excited about this. I want to show you everything. All right, so let's go back here. All right. So what you're seeing here, this is what we call a pole mounted transformer. So remember, the substation steps it down to a certain voltage, and the pole mounted transformer steps it down even further, because we need to make sure that the voltage that comes to your house is at a lower voltage than what we transmit it and distribute it at. So you have ones that are called pole mounted transformers, and you see it looks like that in your neighborhood. And then you also have pad mounted transformers, and it looks like that in your neighborhood. They're both the same thing. It's just that the pole mounted transformers serve what's called overhead. So all those power lines you see, and there's areas where you don't see the power lines. We call that all underground. And that gets served by the pad mounted transformer, but they do the same thing. They transform power. They go from a higher voltage to a lower voltage, then they go to your community, to your house, and things of that nature. All right, let's keep going. All right, next is, now this is part of the load now, right? So if you have an electric vehicle, or if you've been in the community and you've seen those kinds of things, you'll see car charging stations. You might see some in major stores and shopping malls. You may have one in your garage if your parents has a car charger. So these are all load that we see as utility. So what you're seeing here is one of our car charging stations in Florida. We're expanding. We're trying to install up to 500 car chargers throughout the state. And this is one of the ones that we've installed to kind of promote the use of electric vehicles as a new form of transportation as we go into this electrification process. So what you're seeing again, here's one of our car chargers. Again, it's part of the load. And on my model, you see that little blue car? That is my representation of an electric vehicle charging. All right, let's keep going. So now we're going to show you some load controls on our model. So you have the residential building, we have the commercial building, and we have the car charger. So in a minute, you're going to see those loads coming on the system and how it impacts our generation at our power plant. Okay, let's keep moving. All right. All right. Next is the commercial load. Sorry about that, guys. All right, here's the commercial load. So again, here's a building. So again, these are usually offices, Walmarts, Publixes, small business. Those are all commercial loads, right? Ice cream shop, pizza shop, those are all commercial loads. And that's how, again, everything that we do at our power plant is to serve all these loads, residential loads, commercial loads, and there are a lot of things involved in those loads as well. So when you have commercial loads, you have new things like motors and pumps. These are all, again, all loads that impact the system differently at different times. But we have to work on all that. So the next step is you're gonna see my son connecting the transmission lines. Remember, these are those huge lines that you see, looks like robots, really steel towers you see throughout the state. And he's connecting the power plant to the community. So let's keep going. All right, good job, Matthias. So he's doing ground to ground, phase A to phase A. And you see him wearing a hard hat. And let me pause again for a second there. Those are the transmission lines I spoke about. So again, you see these huge transmission lines, and their job is to transmit power from our power plants to your substations. And remember, they're going at super high voltage because there's less losses. We lose less power over the distance of the line through resistance when we go at high voltage. And that's what you're seeing right now. Just keep going. All right, good job, Matt. All right. All right, so now our power plant is connected to our substation. Safety first, hard hat, and a safety vest. So what you're seeing right here is the power plant generating electricity. So what you're actually seeing right now is we're cranking power, right? You don't see him, he's kind of hiding under the table. That's funny. But he's cranking power, and you're seeing the power being generated right now at the power plant. Okay, let's keep going. There he goes. So he's the fuel source generating electricity. So he's generating all electricity and it's going to the load. Now Isabella's going to start turning on the load. So you saw her turning on the residential house and it lit up. That's load, right? She's going to turn on the commercial building now, or the car charger, sorry. So she's charging up the car right now and that's getting charged. All this is new load on the system. And now you're going to see Isabella turning on the commercial load after that. Go ahead, Isabella. Great job. So now what you're not seeing is how hard it is for Matt to spin now. It's getting harder and harder and harder for him to spin. And let me pause for a second to explain this concept. So when we say load, we really mean load. I mean, it is a heavy load to bear. So when there are more and more people using electricity, our system needs more and more fuel. So it can be more and more natural gas, more and more natural gold, more and more coal rather, more and more wind, more and more solar if it's during a time where solar is being generated in the daytime. Those are things that we as a utility have to manage and figure out where we can bring those power from at the lowest cost to keep your rates down. So but again, that load is a physical thing. He's turning, and then when she's turning on all those switches on the community, it is getting harder and harder and harder to spin, because again, that is what load is. That's the physical or the physics of load. All right, let's keep going. You guys are doing great. So you see things getting lit up. This is virtual YEA. We've done a Youth Energy Academy with this as well. So let's get into the solar side of it now. So our power plant has, remember, Matt is cranking the generator. So that's representing the thermal sources, right? We're spinning something with natural gas or coal or nuclear that are creating heat and creating pressure and cause something to spin. That's Matt spinning. We also have the other sources. This is going to be solar. So what you're going to see is a representation of solar as well at our power plant. So what you're seeing right now on this plant panel here, you're seeing the generator voltage. Matt's not spinning right now, so we shut down the generator, and we just see the solar panel voltage. So right now it's like 3.2 volts. And on the right, you're seeing a representation of solar panels. Let's keep going. So what you're going to see is what happens in the middle of the day in the summer. Sorry about that, guys. In the middle of the day in summer, what happens is it usually rains in Florida. So when it rains in Florida, what happens? There's usually clouds. So when clouds come by, and you see my cool cloud graphic there. So the clouds coming by the solar panel, and watch the voltage of the green arrow. It's dropping. So this is why this is where different technologies, and I'm gonna pause for a second to advocate for STEM, right? So I really like for you guys to think about, your future in your career and how you want to have an impact. As we work through these technologies, there's challenges. So what happens when there is rain and there's cloud cover? The output of our plants drop. So how do we combat that? Maybe batteries, right? If we can get batteries to a place where they're low, and it's happening, where batteries cost comes down, and you can supplant some of that diminished load, diminished generation rather, by battery packs or batteries, then you can help kind of ride out those moments of intermittent loss when clouds go across our panels and reduce our generation or our production. Let's continue on. All right. And you also see the impact to the neighborhood, right? So it's hard. I know it's hard to see, but you see the lights right there. When the cloud goes over, the lights drop because, again, we're losing our generation source. So we, as a utility, we have to figure out how we keep your power from not dimming, from not going off when we have issues with winds not blowing or when the sun is not blowing. So let's look at it all together. So we're going to see the generator generating power. The solar panels also generating electricity as well. Okay. We're going to keep moving through.
And Derek, we are starting to get some questions coming in. So we're getting into our Q&A period. So I'll just give you a quick little heads up. Perfect.
Great. We're doing great. We're doing good. All right. So we're getting the power coming into our transmission lines and into our substation, into our community. And you're seeing our residential house is lit up. All right. And then we're going to keep going on. You're going to see the distribution. And at nighttime, you'll have street lights on. All this is load. And you see those are lit up. You're seeing a car being charged. You're seeing the commercial building open. They're using electricity. You're seeing the motor spinning. So all these things are a part of generation of power, transmitting of power, and distributing of power. All right, let me pause for a second. Are we good? Can I go into the QA now, or I have more?
Absolutely, yeah. We're getting a couple great questions in.
So let's go for the questions.
All right, so for everyone coming in, it's time for the Q&A period, and like I said, we are getting some really good ones. Now we're going to
Right.
do our best to get to all of the different questions that are coming in,
Mhm.
but don't get discouraged. Please submit them, keep submitting them. If we can't get to your question due to time constraints, we're going to get back to you with a response via email to all the different teachers that we have.
All right.
Keep in mind we got about 3,300 students participating in our virtual science festival, so we're going to do our best to get to all of these different questions.
That's fine.
And so one of the first questions popping up, Derek, is we've heard the term transformers blow. What is it?
Yes.
What does it mean when a transformer blows?
So there's an overload typically what happens. So usually that happens when, I mean, there's all kind of protections in the system, right? So if you ever notice at home, I'll make it quick. I know we got a lot of questions. So at home, you ever notice like in the middle of the day when the power kind of goes out and it comes back on again or might flicker, right? So we call those brownouts. When it completely goes out, we call it a blackout. So what that flicker is the system trying to protect itself. So let's say a storm is happening and a wind is blowing and it's causing a tree branch to go across different phases on the power line. You might have three phases or three lines: phase A, phase B, phase C, and at the bottom it's a ground line. So let's say a tree branch kind of hits across two of those phases. So what the system sees that fault, and if it clears, like the wind moves the tree branch, it shuts it off and it checks it, comes back on again. And if that fault is cleared, your power stays on. But what happens if that tree branch has broken off, fallen across those lines, and it's stuck there? It's going to check it 3 times. It's going to go check it, fault, come off again. Check it, fault, come off again. Check it, fault, come off again. And if that fault never clears, it needs one of our line techs to go out there and physically move that tree branch. Then it shuts off completely. But during storms or during events, this is happening so rapidly that it's happening too fast. You're feeling the protection, and instead of causing things to fail, the transformer will essentially blow, because in there is all this transformation of power. You go from high voltage to low voltage, and there's oil in there to keep it cool. But when you have these catastrophic events like hurricanes, things of that nature, it happens so fast that the transformers blow. Now, typically, the oil, things like that, help to suppress some of the fire, and there's different fire suppression technologies in the transformers to help mitigate that. But that's a part of that. That's what's happening. The transformers connections are actually blowing and it's being severed from. And there's also things you hear like fuse blowing. You might hear that sound like kind of like a gunshot sound. There's actually a fuse on the line as well. These are all protection techniques. So when the fuse blows, there's actually a charge in there that when it detects the overcurrent, it blows and actually swings the fuse down to clear the lines. It shuts power off, but it stops from fires from happening, things of that nature. So that's kind of what happens. It's actually causing the transformer to malfunction because of a catastrophic event.
Fascinating. I didn't know that about that with the fuses.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions we're getting in, one of the students wants to know, is nuclear power safe?
Oof, nuclear power safe. So I tell you one thing, right? It's one of the cleanest forms of generation, right? There is no greenhouse gases from nuclear power. There have been incidences in the past where there have been some challenges to nuclear, but by and large, if you look at the course of history, how long we've been using nuclear in America, there has not been any significant issues in the country. So in terms of getting to the place where you get to a 2050 net zero of emissions, it's going to be difficult to get there with only renewable, with only solar, with only wind. So there has to be some kind of mix in there. And the challenge is to get to that number at that time frame without anything else is incredibly difficult. It's hard. It's hard. And these are all the questions that that you ask, that you have concerns on. And as you go through your studies, we hope that you can come back into our industry and help us solve these challenges. But yeah, for by and large, for Duke Energy, we haven't had any issues like that has caused any safety concerns for our customers.
So we live in Florida. Does that mean we get more energy from hydroelectric from the water than other places?
So great question. So hydroelectric, what do you think? I mean, what do you think hydroelectric needs? I know you can't answer me, right? So I'm asking this rhetorically, but hydroelectric needs diversity of geography, right? And I don't know if you've noticed, Florida is probably one of the more flatter states in the country. So that's why we don't have too much dams or things like that, because you need to go from a high location to a low location, which causes water to flow rapidly. So that's why you don't really see a hydroelectric. Now, you look at your license plate, you see, we're the sunshine state. And yeah, we produce a lot. We have a lot of sun. Obviously, we have a lot of clouds, so that impacts that. but that's where more of the renewables are, is more in the solar than hydroelectricity for where we are. Now there's states in our country that definitely are beautiful for that, because they have the diversity of land print. They go from high to low, water flows, they go through waterfalls, things of that nature, that causes all that power to be generated from water flow.
Awesome. Well, we got 30 seconds, so so I have one last question for you, and then we
All
need
right.
to wrap this up.
Okay.
Why do you want to work at Duke Energy? Why work at Duke Energy?
Oh, I love that question. I love that question. All right, so I will make 30 seconds. That's way too short. All right, so I started out as an intern. Okay, so when you go through your college experience, if that is your route, and all routes are cool with me, man. All routes are cool with me. But if college is your experience, I got in through an internship. Right, didn't quite know what I wanted to do. Went to USF, I was at the Sun Dome, had my flip flops on, went to a job fair, and just happened by we were Progress Energy at that time. Happened by their table, and they said, "Hey, come by, let's chat." Had a conversation, turned into a career. So when I started my world, I started with large accounts, understanding large customers. Then I moved into energy efficiency to help customers be more efficient, and this is mostly on the commercial side. And then I'm into the solar world. So that progression of experiences all happened within one company. We do so much. I didn't even get a chance to get into electric vehicles. We're into that world. We're into all these different, if you're into cyber technology, into IT, there's that world. If you're into the medical field, we have nurses on our staff. We have pilots, people that fly drones on our staff. If you're into video games and controlling, there's drone pilots that fly to check our system. So you have all these different options within one company. We're within a lot of other companies. You have to leave the company to kind of have those experiences. So that's if I can give you 30 seconds, is the opportunities that is afforded to me by working in the utility space.
You failed in 30 seconds, but that's awesome. We'd love to see the passion with it.
I tried,
Derek. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Go Bulls. And for those of you listening, you're welcome to stay on the track. We'll be back soon with another talk, or feel free to jump to another track. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.